Here we go. The Aristocrats is the two-word punchline to a very long, very obscene, very disgusting joke that apparently dates back to the days of vaudeville. It's a gag that comedians would tell to each other. It has a very short setup, which is a guy goes into an agent's office, says, "I've got this act." And then he describes this act that he does on stage, which is however much depravity one wants to describe. And then at the end, and I'm not giving this away because they say this at the beginning of the film, at the end, the agent says, "That's terrible, what do you call it?" And he says, "The Aristocrats." Now, apparently, amongst comedians, who I have to say can be a fairly humorless bunch, this has become a test between them to see who can do the grossest, the nastiest, the vulgarest, the most offensive, the most obnoxious version of this joke. And now we have a documentary, which is literally a one-joke film, in which everyone, from Whoopi Goldberg to Robin Williams to, well, basically George Carlin, I think there are 100 comedians in all.
Eddie Izzard's in there?
He is in it, although interestingly enough, Eddie Izzard sort of kind of refuses to tell the joke, and I think he's on smart ground. Anyway, on the upside, okay, the joke itself is never funny. It's not meant to be funny. The thing is meant to be how, different comedians tell the jokes in different ways, and this tells you something about the different comedians. And that's kind of interesting. There's a little bit of discussion about how there's a difference between shock and satire and the way in which comedy pushes our boundaries, and that's kind of interesting. And then there's an awful lot of a bunch of self-obsessed, miserable comedians talking about how the joke is like a jazz riff, and like the way in which we improvise on it is like John Coltrane. And you go, no, it's not. It's a rude joke, and you're telling long versions of it, and it is a certain amount of verbal waving your bottom in the air that's involved in that, but it's not as big and clever as you think it is. And the problem with it is, apparently the longest version of the joke was strung out for something like 90 minutes. Well, the movie itself is virtually 90 minutes, and by about 45 minutes in, I was thinking, okay, I have now heard every version of this joke. I've seen a South Park cartoon version, I've seen somebody miming it, I've seen somebody doing it with a ventriloquist doll, I've seen somebody doing it as a card trick, and I think what's most bothersome is that when they go off into their "I'm really going to push the boundaries of shock," the stuff that they talk about is actually incredibly conservative. I mean, I did spend an awful lot of it saying, thinking, if you really want to shock me, do something that I don't expect. But in fact, that's not what happens. So it's not uninteresting. There are good things about it. But at 90 minutes, it certainly overstays its welcome. And there's a thing at the end of it which says, right, now you've heard the joke, tell us your version for inclusion on the DVD. I think, believe me, after a 90-minute movie about it, the last thing I want to hear is every internet nerd's version of the joke.
Here at the Oval,